how I actually come up with certain projects and situations is always part of what I'm intrigued with at that moment. Like right now, I'm really into the idea of contemporary surrealism and thinking about the implications of what certain styles of early film, like Méliès, or later stuff like Cocteau or even D.W. Griffith, they were thinking about mythology and the epic film and poetry. But for our era, it would be like seeing Fox TV or something, So that's where the Bush remixes and all this kind of stuff is coming out of. But it's just a particular fascination with this specific project. So the Public Enemy project is totally different than the Cocteau project. And then, for example, when the Cocteau thing comes out, we're going to have a surrealist fashion show in Paris. And Yves Saint Laurent was a big collector of Cocteau's work, so they're going to sponsor the show, and everyone's going to get like a surrealist, clothes or something.
So,
I guess.
Yeah. So the technology is not really just a tool; it is the material.
Yeah, but the funny thing is like, again, looking at composers like Yannis Xenakis, you can see how he would make a mathematical algorithm be either a composition with an orchestra playing, or for that matter, it could be an architectural schematic that would then be made into a building. It's funny, in New York, I lived next door to the sculptor Richard Serra, and he sort of makes this big, I always bring this one up because it's a really funny tension between the big, modernist, whatever kind of sculpture, and mine's invisible and software. But lately, all he does is just draw a couple sketches and send it to a factory in Germany by email. It's just a computer scan with the schematics and drawing. And they open the file up, and then 3 weeks later, somebody gets a 70-ton piece of steel on their doorstep. It doesn't, like the same thing happens.
Transformation of materials. It's sort of like that idea of the transformation of materials. It can happen. It's sort of a mixture, I guess, of the materials and the idea.
But the funny thing is, the invisible in our era, I think, has a lot more power than invisible. In fact, I'm really a big partisan of this idea of thinking about dematerialization of the art object, which is what one of my favorite art critics, Lucy Lepard, was riffing on in the 60s, was that she felt that the concept of art had taken over from the materials. So at that point, you could have the idea of the art object without necessarily needing to represent it. And if you look at the history of Western art in general, representation was such a heavy issue throughout the Renaissance on up until the Industrial Era. But once you moved into the culture of the copy, who cares about the original? You can make the copy the exact same thing as the original. And this is where Walter Benjamin was trying to figure out, but he was still dealing with mechanical reproduction. I'm dealing with quote-unquote cybernetic reproduction. In fact, cybernetic replication, i.e. copy, copy, copy. The software, if you download something, it's the exact same software. And the funny thing is, it's a matter of establishing an interface with it to create the project, right? So whether I'm using Photoshop or Pro Tools, say for example, I can usually tell when somebody's used that style of software. Like I call it Pro Tools Edit. You can hear how somebody would have put a drum beat together, or a bass line, or like the synth modules for the strings that go with my piece, Birth of a Nation. Let me just show you, for example. I always tend to find visual material helps people get the idea. This is a piece where I was working with a 76-piece orchestra, and I had them play the riffs and the motifs that I was playing on my computer, so that you couldn't tell what was live versus not live. And again, the Freudian implications there, you're looking at the artwork of the uncanny, the invisible. In German, it's the unheimlich. So you're not sure who is playing what. We presented this in San Francisco, and it was funny because the audience couldn't tell. Like I would see them like clapping during a solo, and the violins had stopped playing. And it was me while I was coming off with the software from the computer. Or for that matter, like when they would be playing, everybody would think I was mixing and cutting them, and I could actually just let them play. But these kinds of indeterminacies are still inheritances of that whole John Cage notion of accepting random chance. But then other projects I've done, say for example, this is a piece I did with Miri Baraka. He's a legendary beat poet who focused on this idea of what he called the changing same. And for him, poetry was, again, if you look at the beats in the 50s, all of them were playing language games. William S. Burroughs with the cut-up technique, Jack Kerouac with this kind of stream of consciousness narrative, Allen Ginsberg with that idea of the primal scream and like kind of bizarre interior poetry. But Baraka was the first MC to me because he was the first person to tell a band, okay, don't keep playing all these different styles, focus on this one riff and repeat it. So I sampled his voice and then sampled his old jazz records from the 50s that he used to like, and we made these collaborations. But again, that's radically different than Slayer.
I love what you're doing, and I think it's very complex in a narrative way, political, lots of content. But I'm wondering if you ever think about deconstructing the actual musical beats. I haven't heard you do anything that's not in 4. And I mean, I know you've got a lot of syncopation. Do you have a philosophy to that being a part of it being hip hop? Is there any chance you would do something more complex?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, you know, maybe it's better just to play a quick example. This is a piece that I did with Pierre Boulez. Actually, we was presenting at Carnegie Hall. And basically it was called They Leave. And Boulez is one of these composers that came up with what he calls a kind of stochastic method of thinking about composition and mathematics. And he has the piece Derive in French means derived from, but it also means a sense of movement. So again, this is another situation where I had an orchestra playing with me and then sampled them and was playing the same material. So here you go. This is literally a piece from Carnegie Hall 2 weeks ago. But the complexity issues that Pierre Boulez is noted for, once those become part of the digital environment, for me it's just more samples for the mill. You know, I can just cut it up and splice it in any way.
Okay, well, I think we can leave you alone. Thank you very much.
I need my books and those CDs back.
Please. Never leave here. This time, yes, good. This time.